of the AAP. And I would just like to thank right now, of course, the Illinois chapter of the AAP for supporting all of the work that we are doing in the Peoria area. I would like to thank everyone involved in the iSpan grant, and especially the Illinois Public Health Institute, IPHI, who helps us with every step of our iSpan project and is facilitating this webinar for us. So thank you to all the people making this work possible. I'd like to introduce our speaker today, talking about a subject that I'm very, very looking forward to hearing about. Our speaker is Trish Wairenga. In addition to being a good friend and former coworker of mine, Trish works as a private practice IBCLC with her consulting business, Total Lactation Care. Trish has been a nurse since 1998, a lactation consultant in the Central Illinois area since 2011, and she recently decided to take on something else really big and graduated with her master's degree in nursing, and recently passed her exam and is now a board certified family nurse practitioner. She's also certified in perinatal mental health. Trish is a member and the current chairperson of the International Affiliation of Tongue-Tie Professionals, a member of the International Lactation Consultant Association, a member of the United States Lactation Consultant Association, a member and the vice chairperson of the Central Illinois Breastfeeding Task Force, and a member of Postpartum Support International. You got a lot going on there, Trish. She has spoken at conferences locally and internationally on the role of the IBCLC and on the assessment and management of tongue and lip tie issues in relation to breastfeeding challenges, airway, and other facets of wellness. And I'm hoping that one of these times I'm going to be able to get Trish to talk about tongue tie on one of these webinars. She lives in Central Illinois with her husband, Brian, and 4 children. She is currently traveling, so that's why she's in her car. And without further ado, I'd like to turn it over to Trish.
Thank you so much for inviting me to do this talk. This was really exciting to me because I have not ever done a talk on using social media for breastfeeding support, but that is something that we as lactation consultants nowadays use as one of our primary manners of communicating and providing information to our patients. So I am very excited to start this talk. So thank you, Beth, and to everybody that invited me to do this. So here's my contact information. Feel free to take a snapshot of this. If you want to put your phone up there, just take a little picture of this one. This has everything that you need to contact me for my private practice. And then also I do now work at the Birth Center of Bloomington Normal. So I put their contact information there and my email there as well. So go ahead and feel free to take a little snapshot of that. And then this, most everything Beth already said, just one little disclosure, I am not fancy enough to sell anything, so that would not be a problem here. And she already said I am a wife and a mother and am very excited to be here. So our objectives, and let me see if I can move this because it's right over my objectives. Thank you. All right, so the objectives for today, at the end of this webinar, attendees will understand the benefits of and the research supporting social media platforms for infant feeding support. Hopefully you will be able to acknowledge the potential pitfalls of support for infant feeding via social media, and identify ways lactation staff can work side by side with social media resources to provide support to parents in this digital age. So that's hopefully what we're going to get out of this 30 to 45 minute talk here. So way back when, right? Way back when, this was me in the year 2000, taking care of my brand new baby daughter. And back then, what kind of support and information did we have for breastfeeding? I did breastfeed her, but where did I find my information? So here's where I found my information. Books, right? Now I'm admittedly not a big reader, but I did read some breastfeeding books just to gather some information. I took a breastfeeding class at the hospital and met who is ultimately one of my favorite people on this planet. Miss Edie Orr was my lactation consultant way back in the year 2000. And she taught me a lot about breastfeeding. I took her class, and then subsequently I worked as a registry nurse at that same hospital and was able to do some of my registry nursing there on their floor. So I did become good friends with her, as well as my other coworker there at the time, Rhonda, and now many workers since then. The lactation staff and the nursing staff at the hospital, they were a big part of the education that I received in those couple of days that I was in the hospital. Friends and family, yes, I do have to say I felt a little more isolated during this first time. I lived in a different town than most of my friends and family, but I was able to still talk to them and get some information. And then the internet. So we, at that time, back in the year 2000, had a 56K dial-up modem. And those of you that remember that, right? That was the sound. Does that bring back any like bad memories to anybody? Right? It was something that you heard all the time. It took forever for different websites to pull up. If you wanted to go to this website to find information, you found it, but then you had to switch over to a different website and it took forever again. And it always dropped your internet connection, right? So that was what we had in the year 2000. And then when my second child was born in 2002. Whoops, hold on. There we go. So what about in 2005 and 2008? So this is my family then in 2008 at the birth of my fourth child. So what kind of information did I have back then? Well, I had found La Leche League. With my third child, that little red head at the bottom of that picture, that is where I found La Leche League. And I started attending those meetings, which was a huge place to find support for me. Because I was in La Leche League, I had access to New Beginnings magazine. I knew about Mothering magazine, Parents magazine. So that was another way we found information at that time. And again, because of La Leche League, I read The Womanly Art of Breastfeeding. And that was another source of information. But then in 2008, just before my fourth child was born, I signed up for this new thing called Facebook. Okay, so I signed up for a Facebook account, and mostly it was so that I could announce the birth of my fourth child to all of my friends and family. So just for fun, here's a little picture of my current situation with all of these children that are now old and doing things on their own. So, all right, so what about that early literature on breastfeeding support? What did we have, right? Any sort of journal articles focused on in-person and phone support. But then in 2011, we had the Surgeon General's call to action, which then encouraged the use of media and electric communication to provide support to new families. So once we had that call to action, things changed. And we were able to provide support in a different way. So that's what we're going to be talking about today. Here is the impact of social media on breastfeeding support. And this is what we're talking about, right? So we are talking about Google. We are talking about Facebook. We are talking about Instagram, YouTube, Skype, Snapchat, Vine, TikTok. All of these different things now are where our clients get their information. So what are the basics of it, right? If I wanted to sign up for to be on a social media platform, I would create a profile. So I would take my name, my email address, and it's all really to be able to text, instant message, share photos and videos, and get feedback from others. So to communicate with other people that you maybe haven't spoken with for a long time, or you wanted to become part of this group or that group, or you wanted to follow this person on Instagram. So that was the basic. You wanted to communicate and get feedback. And you also wanted to be able to provide support. I know we have people in our local breastfeeding support group that are not breastfeeding anymore, and they are there to help provide perspective and support to those new families. So just on a little side note, just for perspective, Facebook actually has 2.7 billion monthly users. And I say that's billion with a B. That's a huge number. And I heard this just the other day to put it into perspective. The number of seconds in a million is like you just go on vacation for 12 days. So 12 days of seconds is 1 million. 30 years of seconds is 1 billion. So Facebook has close to 2.7 billion users. That's a lot of users. 68% of adults in the United States use Facebook, and 75% of parents use social media for information. So I found this chart online, and this is where we got that information. So the MAU is monthly average users. So you look at Facebook, 2.7 billion users, YouTube, 2 billion, WhatsApp. That is something that I use to communicate with my colleagues across the globe in IATP, is WhatsApp. Instagram, 1.16 billion, TikTok, Snapchat, all of these different platforms. Interestingly, they all have their headquarters in California, which I didn't know about. The newest one is TikTok, and that is one I know that my kids use all the time. But I thought this was interesting to see how many people are really using these social media platforms. So in the last couple of days, I did put out a survey to our local breastfeeding support group and got, a decent number of answers, 31 responses to that. So throughout the rest of this presentation, I will have information from that survey on the use of social media in our local area. So on that survey, I did ask what method of support is the easiest for them to access. So I included their primary care provider, family and friends, in-person and virtual support groups. But overwhelmingly, 74% of the people said that websites and social media platforms are the easiest way to access breastfeeding support and infant feeding support. So then when I asked more specifically which platform is their preferred social media platform, again, overwhelmingly with almost 84% of the people that responded to my survey was Facebook. And we know that obviously that is probably a bit of a biased answer because I asked this survey on our local Facebook group, but I do know that parents in this time, they use Instagram, they use all these others. So I do know that that was a biased question, but I do believe that at least in our area, we have a lot of people that Facebook would be a good option for them. So some common Facebook groups, I thought, I'm going to find some common Facebook groups that I use and see how many members are in them. So our Central Illinois Breastfeeding Moms group has 5,500 local members. Breastfeed Chicago, 7,500 members. The Birthing and Breast or Chest Feeding Trans People and Allies group has 6,800 members. The IGT and Low Milk Supply Support Group has 10,000 members. And then Tongue Tie Baby Support Group has 87,000 members. So people are searching for these specialized groups to find a community of people that are like-minded. And I think that's important to know for a slide that I have later on in the presentation. So they get peer support by joining these groups. We know by a journal article by Bridges et al. That both informational and emotional support was commonly provided by peer supporters who commented on their wall posts on social media. We see that all the time in our local breastfeeding group. Peer-to-peer help, which was and is the main source of support in the group that I joined first, La Leche League, right? La Leche League is meant to be a peer-to-peer breastfeeding support group, but that was in person. And so now we have these virtual platforms that are providing peer-to-peer support. So a little quiz here. So I don't know if you can put something in the chat box or if Beth would be willing to take a look at that just to see what people say. So here's our little quiz. So Facebook is the most widely used, but what do you think is the social media platform that has seen the fastest growth? What do you think? see. Yep, some people are putting some things on there. Let's see.
Everybody's saying
Yep.
TikTok, TikTok, TikTok.
You're absolutely right. Yep, you're absolutely right. TikTok is absolutely the social media platform that has seen the fastest growth. Um, you know, like I said, my kids are on it all the time. My husband is on it all the time. I only get on there to see things that they send me, but it was launched 5 years ago, and that is a video-based platform, very short videos. And so I know that people are able to post little like informational videos. Here's a way to a great latch, or here is a way you can set up your, pump. And that is a way that some lactation consultants are sending information over social media to their clients. So probably about 9 months ago or a year ago, maybe, this was a big trend on TikTok where they showed a baby that saw their mom's breasts and then their reactions. And it was hysterical. I saw it. It was so funny. And there was one commenter that said, you know what, is this a really good way for breastfeeding support, right? Or do you have maybe some younger parents or teenagers that would see that, and then maybe is that a pitfall to social media? Would they say that and say, oh my goodness, I don't want this baby like doing this to me? So you have to look at some of these social media platforms, and I thought it was hysterical and I thought it was wonderful, but we also have to look at our clients too and see kind of whether we think that's a great thing or a bad thing. So next quiz time. All right, here's the next one. Which platform was previously the place for advertising, but is now favored by, cough, cough, an older demographic? This should be pretty easy for you also.
Facebook?
Yeah, absolutely, Facebook. Yep. So that's where I get so much information is from Facebook. I know that many of our clients use Instagram, quite often. So we know Facebook support and not the total support received outside of Facebook. So that means books, magazines from your primary care provider. But Facebook support was significantly correlated with intended breastfeeding duration, which suggests that support mothers receive within the Facebook group may be an important factor relating to breastfeeding decisions. I thought that was absolutely succinct, and it said what I thought I knew, but I know that people that are on our Central Illinois Breastfeeding Moms group end up breastfeeding longer because they get that support from their friends. Last little question here. So what two platforms are now preferred by Gen Z, so the 6 years old to 22 years old, and then our millennial generation?
TikTok.
What would you think is the second one?
Instagram.
Or Twitter.
Exactly. Yep, exactly. So it's Instagram and TikTok is what the research showed. And again, I think that we see that in our practice. So who are these millennial parents? So they are the ones that have been born between 1980 and 1999. We know they are very, very tech savvy. We know that their preferred method of communication is texting and social media. I do not have my children, my oldest is 21. She doesn't call her friends. She texts her friends. She sends them a snap. She, sends them an Instagram message. So they don't call each other. We know that in-person interaction is just not as highly regarded as that virtual communication. And they're very big on immediate gratification. Now, the good thing is that we have all of these apps now. Apps are where it's at, right? So here are some things that we use via social or via a virtual platform to get information. We have fertility trackers. We have period trackers. During our pregnancy, you don't usually see a parent that doesn't know what size her baby is based on an app that sends her information on a weekly basis. Baby feedings, I can tell you, and that could also just be my personality, but when I had kids, number one, we didn't have apps on our phone. We didn't have digital cameras with when my first baby was born. So just that technology wasn't there, but I didn't track on my phone how often my baby fed or how often they had an out, wet or a stool. But very often now we have our clients, when we ask them, how many pees and poops has your baby had over the last 24 hours? They are not, very rarely, able to tell us off the tip of their tongue, but they say, hold on, I have my app and I can tell you how many times, right? And they pull it out and they say, okay, this is when they fed, this is what breast they fed on, and here is how many pees and poops that they've had. So that's a change from 20 years ago when I first starting having kids. Pumping trackers, parenting apps, and then for us as providers, we do have a lot of apps that are very useful to us as well. We use Medications and Mother's Milk and the Infant Risk app all the time to help families decide about medications and breastfeeding. We have different protocols. I'm a nurse practitioner now. I have sexually transmitted infection protocols. I have CDC. I have Hippocrates. I have all of these different apps that help guide practice. So apps are very useful, and that is how our clients are now getting a lot of information too. So on our local survey, I asked, what are the benefits of social media for breastfeeding? And here were some of the things they said. And it's, this was supported in the research. It's very cost efficient, right? It doesn't cost anything besides what your phone costs and, if you have subscriptions to things, but it's very cost efficient to go onto your local breastfeeding group via Facebook. Very quick responses on a variety of topics. I know that several of our families will put something down and within minutes, they'll have a bunch of answers. Input from various backgrounds, different socioeconomic status, different populations of people. They are also able to get information in the middle of the night, right? I probably would not answer my phone at 2 o'clock in the morning, but you could put a post on Facebook, and the moment someone is awake, scrolling on their phone, feeding their baby in the middle of the night, they may get an answer. And that support is in the form of emotional support, social support, education, all kinds of support. And I heard from one mom that it softens the social isolation. And I've seen that too, right? I felt very isolated with my first and second child. Like I said, I didn't have many friends where I was, but being part of that virtual community with my fourth child softened that social isolation. Robinson et al. Says that positive messaging on social media can influence breastfeeding attitudes and norms. And per our survey, here were some of the quotes, right? Assurance that what I was going through, those things are normal and that I don't have to be alone in this journey, that there's like-minded people. She didn't get shamed for feeling that breast is best for her children or family, and she wanted to push through any hardships that continue breastfeeding. And that middle of the night feeling helpless and hopeless and easily being able to get questions, ask questions and get those answers. So there's 2 other research studies I just want to point out. Obviously there are a lot more, but these were 2 of them that I liked. In 2017, there was a study, a decent sized study of African-American mothers that used Facebook breastfeeding groups. Plus they also used WIC, La Leche League, and IBCLC and their healthcare provider and family. It looked at self-efficacy and breastfeeding attitudes, and those were both significant predictors of intended breastfeeding duration. It looked at the perceived breastfeeding norms, and the average breastfeeding duration for this study of African-American mothers was actually 19 months. And that exceeds the current averages for that population. So is it possible that Facebook was what gave them the support they needed to succeed? There were also some limitations, obviously. They all looked at very popular Facebook groups in this study. There was definitely some selection bias and some of the support methods, but I thought this was a nice study to look at how Facebook in particular was very supportive of breastfeeding duration for these families. And then a very small study of Finnish mothers that were mothers of preterm infants. They all reported that they received inadequate support for breastfeeding by the nurses in the hospital, but that peer support group through Facebook provided needed information for them. Facebook support and not the total support received outside of Facebook was significantly correlated with that intended breastfeeding duration. And that's the same quote that I had earlier. So in looking at our survey again, what topics I asked them, and you'll notice there's all kinds of these topics on there, and they could choose as many as they wanted. But what topics were they most likely to seek information on social media for? Overwhelmingly, it was nipple pain and trauma, plugged ducts, mastitis, abscess, all of like the difficulties like that. But in close second was pumping. Third, and fourth, you have emotional support and tongue and lip tie. So those were the top 4 things that women in our group that responded to my survey that they are most likely to seek information on. So we've talked about the benefits. There are definitely some pitfalls of social media. Now, for providers, we all have to be very aware of HIPAA guidelines. Technically, if we have a client of ours that says on Facebook, I received fantastic support by so-and-so at this hospital, and that person is part of that group and they go on there and they like that post, then that actually is a HIPAA violation. In our area, I do know that many of our clients are our friends also. So we have to be very careful, and we just have to be aware that there are those pitfalls of social media and HIPAA violations. So just kind of keep that in mind. A very common discussion between healthcare providers and anyone else is, please, don't confuse your Google search with my medical degree. That shows, I think that is downgrading, because parents also are the experts of their child, right? I know of several people in our circles that I would not want to go head to head on in talking about their child's condition. They know their child so much better than many of the healthcare providers there. So when you go back to that slide that I had all of like the members on different Facebook groups, I'm particularly looking at tongue-tied baby support group. And while that support group is maybe not the best one for tongue and lip tie support, there is something about having 87,000 people on that group that they must not be getting that information from their healthcare provider, right? Why are they searching for that info on the web? A good friend of mine, Bobby Gahary, he once said in a lecture that there is a reason why there are 87,000 people on tongue-tied baby support group, and there's likely not, an appendicitis support group, local of Central Illinois, right? That group wouldn't maybe have that many people to it. We have great information. We have people that are searching for that information. So are providers giving, correct information or not, right? We need to be paying attention to that. Okay, so of our local survey, what were some pitfalls? One is that there are very strong opinions on those groups. Sometimes the posts get buried because there's so much activity. Maybe some biased info, like one thing worked for this person, so that they suggest it. It is definitely hard to convey tone on social media. Think about how what we say can be softened by our facial characteristics or by body language, but it's very difficult to convey tone on social media. There is definitely unwanted advice on some peer support groups. But also looking back at for the provider part, breastfeeding support received within Facebook groups may compensate for inadequate support they received within the mothers networks, and that kind of goes back to that tongue-tied baby support group analogy that I made. So what can we do as providers to encourage this kind of support? Because this is where it's going, right? And where it is and where it's going in the future, we need to be able to work very nicely in the sandbox with social media platforms for breastfeeding support. Here's how we can work with them, right? We can look at crowdsourcing, right? That's how I got information for this talk, was crowdsourcing. I went to our local breastfeeding group and I put out a survey. And so we can talk to our local support groups. Crowdsourcing and social media. We get info, we get research, we ask for pictures for our lectures. Pharma and marketing. Marketing is really great, right? We can promote our businesses, we can promote good breastfeeding care, things like that. But also on the flip side, have you ever gotten a formula ad on Facebook after searching a breastfeeding page? So I have a picture of something that I saw, it was a couple of years ago, but this was a story from Wilmington, Illinois, where they were given bad information. A parent was breastfeeding her baby there and they were asked to cover up. Well, as I'm reading this story, look at the ad that comes up on this story, right? So pharma and marketing are big on Facebook. And then also you can get donations for future studies. You know, that would be information that you could get. I have a good friend that was able to crowdsource information for his recent study. And he asked for donations for that. And many of us donated. So another thing that that we as providers can really look at is knowing our audience, right? So if I was in a profession that dealt more with the older population, they maybe wouldn't be on social media as much as our work with new families, they are on social media. So where should we place our time and energy in reaching our clients? Some people are using even Pinterest. They're making a Pinterest board of education. I have a friend that's doing that. Instagram, Facebook, TikTok. If we can figure some of that out, that is a good way to provide information. So knowing our audience. We should, if we are working in the hospitals, private practice, WIC clinics, wherever we are working, we should be encouraging pregnant and new parents to join online support groups, because we have such a front row seat to screen those birthing parents, asking them if they have the support and education they need to be successful with breastfeeding. And we really should embrace these social media groups, because over and over and over and over again, in all of these research articles that I looked at for this talk, they all say that being involved in social media groups increase confidence, increase attitudes toward breastfeeding, and increase knowledge towards breastfeeding. And then the last little tip for providers, like I said on the slide before, we need to really do our own research. We need to know where our clients are getting their information, and we need to practice with social media to become proficient at it. Honestly, I have asked my kids so many times, okay, I want to be able to do this on Instagram. How do I do that? And my oldest daughter, she has done several things on Canva for me for Instagram. So, you know, we need to be educated on how to use social media to our advantage. And I have several friends that even have webinars on that. So thank you. I loved doing this presentation for you. I even liked it like Facebook. So if you have any questions, I am open to questions right now. Let's see if I can.
Thank you, Trish. It's Beth. Thank you so much. Just I was making notes and kind of thinking of maybe some videos that we need to make. But
Yeah.
I would love to hear from anybody you know, on this call who feels like they have been successful in reaching a lot of people, you know, on Instagram, or you know, maybe something other than Facebook.
Hello, my name is Desiree from the Lake County Health Department. First, I want to start off by saying thank you so much for putting this together in our Lake County Health Department through WIC. Can you hear me?
I can.
Okay, in our Lake County, through Lake County, we have a Facebook page that we're trying to start off for all our WIC mothers. And a lot of information that you have provided, something that I really, really like that you said, that we need to be careful as counselors or support mother to mother, is that you said that our mothers are the masters. They're the ones that they know their baby. We never want to take that away from them, because even in not even being a peer counselor and just being a mother, when somebody comes to correct you about your children, there's offense that could be picked up right away. And I like how you set that. Hey, okay, you are the professional, you are the master, you're the one doing this. We're just here lending a hand, on what we know from mother to mother. So I like that. And besides that, the whole information you've provided with media, and this is the new norm now. The media is the new norm. Rather somebody doesn't know how to even get in it, we always have a child or somebody who could log us in and say, how do you do this? Help me out. And sometimes when you need that extra help, and that media is out there to help you, that's the first source that people are going to go to. So thank you so much, Trish. Your energy was so good, and thank you for not making us go to sleep. This was good. I took notes.
Oh, thank you. I really appreciate that. And good luck with your Facebook group.
I appreciate that.
So I see one talk about asking more about HIPAA concerns on there. We just have to be very careful, right? I think that there is you need to know your audience too. There are some of my clients that I would not hesitate to contact them in a different way than I would contact other clients. But those clients that I would contact in this way are maybe friends of mine anyway. So I think just of HIPAA, we need to be exceptionally careful that we are not getting onto someone's Facebook page and say, hey, it was really great to see you today, right? Or if they are commenting on a local Facebook breastfeeding group and you say, remember what we talked about, those would be definitely things that we want to just be careful of, and understand that HIPAA and social media, it's a real thing. And I think the recording will be on their site, right, Beth? And I will send this PDF out so you can put that on there as well.
And Pasang can send it out to the folks who registered as well. And then Trisha, I don't know if you saw somebody else has asked, Nancy Lyman, do you have any concerns about recommending specific support groups who overall are supportive with breastfeeding, however, may promote informal milk sharing?
I think in the same way that we talk about our local breastfeeding support group, we always want to make sure and this is something you say too, Beth, right? We treat it as a smorgasbord and take what you need and leave the rest. And I think that's the same with all breastfeeding support groups. So that's, I guess, my 2 cents would be, I would obviously direct them to a specific support group with caution. And if I lose my computer, it looks like it might be going in just a little bit, but I'm good to stay here until it turns off. All right.
Pasang just said, through iSpan, Illinois breastfeeding leaders created breastfeeding support videos for families during the pandemic. Yeah, so there is a whole YouTube kind of channel that has a bunch of videos that we made during that time. So Pasang shared that.
Yeah, those are fantastic videos, and I would encourage you to send that link to any of your families that would want a video like that. Very short snippets. I think most of us have done some of those videos. Well, I very much enjoyed doing this presentation. This was something that I hadn't put into words before or a talk, and I thought this was a great idea.
Well, I thank you so much, Trish. On the last webinar that we did, this was a suggestion that someone had. So I would ask any of you who are attending, if you have more suggestions please put them in the chat because we certainly took you up on this one. We do have coming up at the end, I think it's July 27th, Joanne Allen from Illinois, our very, very famous Joanne Allen, is going to be talking on the subject of why we need a Black Breastfeeding Week. So I'm really looking forward to that one as well. So I'll
You're
be
saying,
sending out some
Beth,
information
Beth, I
about
think you meant to say August.
August
You said
27th.
July.
Yes, yes, since July 27th was 3 days ago. August 27th. Thank you, Mary. So if you could pencil that into your schedule, that would be great. But do we have any more questions in just a couple minutes that we have left? Sonia, we will be sending out the copy of the recording.
And my request is that everybody put their information in the chat before they leave, please, so we know where you're from and how many people were reached and in what areas of the state. So thank you.
All right, well, if we don't have any more questions, let me just scroll down real quick just to make sure it doesn't look like it. Thank you so much, Trish. This was wonderful, gave me a lot of good ideas. And hopefully we will see everyone back here August 27th.
Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you.